Well, thanks, Kath, and obviously it's the best way to celebrate an anniversary to be speaking from the platform at Labour Party conference. It's fantastic to be here at conference in Labour-run Liverpool. We've got a great venue here at the Echo Arena, and it's just across the river from the centre of the universe, my own constituency of Wallasey. You know, the first time I came to this great new place, I was down there in the front row, and one of my heroines, Chrissie Hynde, was up here on the stage performing with the Pretenders. But I won't be attempting anything as brilliant or as loud as the Pretenders produced that night, partially because I've forgotten to bring my guitar. And anyway, there'll be a few sore heads in the hall, I bet, after Scouse night last night. Now, I can see there are. Now, those of you who came up on the train might have seen the statue of battling Bessie Braddock when you arrived at Lime Street Station. Bessie was the MP for Liverpool Exchange for 24 years, and she was the first woman ever to represent Liverpool in Parliament. She was a passionate campaigner, and she did much to rid Liverpool of its slums. She fought poverty, hunger, and unemployment all her life, and she would have been delighted that conference was taking place in her city. A city Labour-led, revitalised under our government after years of Tory neglect. And you know, now, conference, I worry that those days are returning. As Ed Balls, our Shadow Chancellor, said yesterday, we're living through the darkest and most dangerous times in the global economy for many generations. We need a serious response from this government. But do you know what really makes me angry? It's the Tories and their crude, partisan propaganda about the economic challenges we face. This crisis was not caused by Labour investing in schools or hospitals. It wasn't caused by Labour deciding to regenerate cities like Liverpool either. It was caused by greed in the banking industry, a global failure to rein in the excesses, and every developed Western economy is now grappling with the consequences of those mistakes. And don't let the Tories tell you any different, because they argued for less regulation, and now by making the wrong economic judgments, they're making a bad situation worse. Do you remember Mr. Cameron, Mr. Clegg, posing for the cameras outside Number 10 after the election? Well, 16 months later, we're beginning to see the consequences of the values they both share and the political choices that they've made together. And it's not a pretty sight. Everyone agreed that the deficit had to be tackled, but ferocious Tory austerity wasn't the solution to the crisis. It was the price of Lib Dem seats in the cabinet. Together, both parties made a political choice to cut the deficit further and faster than was economically necessary, and to start cutting before the recovery was secure. Last year, they introduced spending cuts and tax rises that go further and faster than any other advanced economy except Iceland and Ireland. That has made us so much more vulnerable as the global situation has worsened. They made a political choice, too, to put women and children in the front line of those cuts, from closed Sure Start centres, cuts to child tax credits, job losses. Women are bearing the brunt of this Tory-led government's reckless economic experiment. And conference, what's the result so far? They've delivered the biggest squeeze in living standards since the 1920s. And up and down this country, people are feeling the pain. Like the dinner lady I met in South London, who has to work 1.5 hours before she can even cover the cost of her bus fare to get to the job. And now she's worried about this government's cuts to her tax credits. Or like the security officer I met in Liverpool, barely paid the minimum wage, but expected to remain on call through the night for no extra pay and be back in work by 9:30 the following morning. The Daily Telegraph has just calculated that a middle-income family of 4 living in Kent will be £3,252 worse off this year alone. Now, I'm told that this is almost the cost of a full uniform for the Bullingdon Club. Loose change for the Prime Minister and Chancellor maybe, but a hammer blow to already stretched household budgets. Conference, it's people and communities up and down this land that are suffering, but the Tories just don't get it. Their policies are making things worse. The economy is flatlining, growth is at a standstill, unemployment on the rise. 1 in 5 of our young people abandoned to the misery of the dole queue. And the IMF see even greater dangers ahead. The warning signs are flashing red, and yet this Chancellor just sits on his hands, the embodiment of preening complacency. This man who last year claimed that Britain was out of the danger zone, only last month he was at it again. He announced that the UK was a safe haven in the economic storm. And now the Prime Minister warns of a global economy staring down the barrel. But like a medieval physician bleeding an already weak patient, his only prescription is more austerity. Conference, they're addicted to austerity, and their only response to the crisis is to try to export it. Ed Balls yesterday unveiled Labour's 5-point plan for growth. He repeated our commitment to sticking to a tough fiscal strategy to get the deficit down. But almost immediately the Tories dismissed it, again showing they just don't understand the urgent need to get our economy growing. But what of the Liberal Democrats? Well, in Birmingham last week, they were falling over themselves to criticise their Tory friends. The coalition was even described by the Liberal Democrat president as a marriage that would inevitably end in divorce. Well, Conference, if only Nick Clegg had thought to include his promise on tuition fees in the prenuptial agreement. Some say it's a marriage of convenience. To me, it's more of a sleazy affair. Exciting while it lasts, but destructive and likely to end in total embarrassment. In Birmingham last week, nobody was fooled by the Liberal Democrats' cynically choreographed attacks on their own government policy, or their reheated announcements on tax evasion and executive pay, and however much they masquerade as the conscience in this rather peculiar relationship, they've got as much chance of surviving the next election as Sarah Tether has of starting a career as a stand-up comedian. You don't need to take my word for it. For those who haven't, just have a look at YouTube and you'll see exactly what I mean. The fact is, Conference, it's no longer business as usual. We're living through a dangerous and difficult time, a deepening sovereign debt crisis in Europe, the irresponsible brinkmanship of the Tea Party threatening the reputation of America, our own growth choked off by this Tory-led government's reckless experiment. The global financial meltdown and the ongoing crisis is remaking politics and economics around us. Things are more fluid than they have been for a generation, and we have to seize this moment if we're to shape a better future. We have to be bold and we have to be radical. In economics, we need to abandon the bankrupt ideas of the right-wing market fundamentalists and replace them with a socially and environmentally sustainable alternative. We need to create a market system which reflects the ethics of most decent people in this country, not just the interests of a few privileged people at the top. That means tackling the new inequality between those at the top and everybody else. It means taking on the powerful interests holding Britain back. We need real change in the banking system to deal with the scandal of bumper bonuses and falls in lending to small business. And we have to prise open the energy markets to protect millions of hard-pressed consumers trying to cope with soaring bills. We need an economy where morality and ethics count. In politics, as Ed Miliband has been arguing, we need to remake our party organisation. We need to reach out to our new members. We need to encourage others to join and get involved. That's why refounding Labour has been such an important process. Conference, we are in a new political era. It's up to us to put forward a radical alternative to the Tory politics of pessimism and austerity and to the tired and failed ideas of the past. Now is the time to do it. It's our duty. It's our responsibility. Conference, only the Labour Party can stand up for the interests of those in the local communities now in the government's firing line. I came into politics to make a difference, to change people's lives, to work for a fairer, more equal country. And I am proud of our record in government. Sure Start, the minimum wage, halving child and pensioner poverty, building new schools and hospitals. But much of the good we did is now being undone. And I'm not prepared to sit on the sidelines and let that happen. I haven't spent the last 35 years in politics fighting for Labour values to let a government led by the privileged few, for the privileged few, carry on killing opportunity for the many. Conference, my political heroine, Barbara Castle, once said, "In politics, guts is everything." She was a fighter, and we need to follow her example. Conference, now is the time for us to fight to secure a brighter future for our communities and a better future for Britain. Thank you very much.